Hi, this is Mike Montefusco, meteorologist here at the National Weather Service office in Wakefield, Virginia. This is Weather You Want to Know. In this first part of our winter weather series, we'll be talking about the National Winter Weather Outlook, what it is made up of, and the information that it can give you, and the information that it also can't give you. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is the NOAA Winter Weather Outlook for the winter of 2025-2026, basically the December through February forecast for the upcoming year. And as you can see across the Mid-Atlantic region, we are looking at a forecast of near to below normal precipitation across that our area across that 3-month period. As far as temperature goes, we are looking at a forecast of above normal temperatures being forecast for the upcoming winter. Now, in terms of that forecast, the forecast that you saw there from the winter weather outlook is primarily driven by ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And the reason for that is the outlooks are predicted several months in advance, and ENSO does have some skill in predicting temperature. However, it doesn't have great skill in forecasting when and how those temperatures and precipitation occur on a seasonal basis. So basically the correlation of warm and cold, dry and wet from ENSO in and of itself is rather weak. Also taking into effect that generally the weather phenomena that develop across a rather typical winter will occur on time scales that are on average a week or two, or perhaps a month or two, and that those patterns in and of themselves are going to override the ENSO condition. Very similar to what we saw last winter, where a lot of the winter that we saw was basically a lot of that action was confined to a rather short period in the middle to end of the winter season. So teleconnections are going to be a far better indicator. And we're going to get into what teleconnections are as we get into the remainder of this series. But realize that they too have their limitations. And that's really what this series is all about, is talking about what we can forecast and what actually goes into our forecast that you see every day. As far as what ENSO is, let's talk about the ENSO in and of itself. It stands for the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And what the Southern Oscillation is basically a periodic change in sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, off the coast of the Pacific, in the Pacific, generally across the equatorial regions, 3.5 to 4.5 degrees. So basically, there are three phases of ENSO, which are going to affect global circulations at large and therefore have ramifications to temperature and precipitation patterns across chiefly North America. Namely, the El Nino would be an above average sea surface temperature across that region in the equatorial Pacific. So that would be an above average sea surface temperature, and that's typically going to be because more in the way of sunshine and more of a drier period in this region. With La Nina, we would have below normal sea surface temperatures, typically a result of additional convection over this portion of the Pacific, which would then result in less in the way of sunshine and more in the way of cloud cover and precipitation in this area. What that actually winds up doing is buckling the storm track a little bit farther north into North America and making some substantial differences to the storm track, which we're going to talk about here in the next couple of slides. In between those two, in between the El Nino and the La Nina, we have what's called neutral, in some circles talked about as La Nada. And generally that would be roughly within a half a degree of 0 degrees. So basically neither above nor below in any significant way. So the intensity of the El Nino and the La Nina play a big role in what actually occurs here during the winter months. As far as the current ENSO status, we are at this point in a very weakly negative status as of the beginning of the winter season. Sea surface temperatures have generally been near normal this summer, going on into the early portions of fall 2025. Values are trending colder than normal, and then as a result of that, the forecast is for a weak La Nina for the upcoming winter. This is fairly similar to what occurred last winter in the winter of 2024-2025, and that is what we have for our upcoming winter. As far as La Nina, El Nino probabilities for the upcoming winter, there is a 50 to 60% probability of this winter beginning in a weak La Nina phase and then transitioning over to a more neutral phase as we get into the latter portions of the upcoming winter into early portions of spring 2026. This La Nina will generally be weakening across the course of the winter. So its strength is uncertain. The probabilities are favoring a weak La Nina at this time. So while the strength of La Nina can vary, right now that is basically favoring more of a weak La Nina at this time. And the strength of that La Nina can impact temperatures, precipitation, and snowfall as you get into the winter season. Now, since 1990, which is the current period of record for our climate, 1990 to 2020, La Ninas have generally been highly variable with winter precipitation and winter temperatures in our mid-Atlantic region. Going forward with that, patterns really can't predict at this kind of a time range, 3-4 months out, what are likely going to be the main drivers behind snowfall on any week or any monthly basis. So the factors that are actually going to go into that winter weather pattern, so the jet stream placement and the strength, precipitation sources, things of that nature, are generally going to be on a shorter time scale, generally a week or two or three, rather than months or two at a time. And that is something we need to bear in mind, is this seasonal outlook in and of itself really doesn't get into the meat and potatoes of what we're actually going to see with the upcoming winter, because they really can't. As far as the outlook itself, let's get in a little bit closer to our neck of the woods here in the mid-Atlantic. We are looking at a 35 to 40% probability of above normal temperatures over the 3-month period from December through February. So meteorological winter of the upcoming winter. There is some uncertainty there with respect to our temperatures. Really, there is not any real way that we can forecast how those overall temperatures occur. So if indeed we do have above average temperatures over that 3-month period, that's not to say that it won't be a couple of degrees above normal, or maybe a couple of tenths of degrees above normal. So it really does not take into account the degree of the above normal or below normal, and it also doesn't take into account why that occurs. Further, it also doesn't preclude strong blasts of Arctic air from time to time. We could be a degree or two above normal for the meteorological winter, but have a very, very cold period. Recall this past January of 2025, the Gulf Coast actually saw some of their biggest snows ever recorded. In some cases, their biggest snow recorded, going back for their entire period of record, back into the late 1800s, and very, very cold air that occurred over some portions of the deep south as well. And even here into the mid-Atlantic, we had some very cold periods as well. However, generally, on average, temperatures ended up above normal across the deep south into the a good portion of the southeastern United States up into the mid-Atlantic here. So those Arctic outbreaks are going to depend on Arctic temperatures and the NAO phase, and we're going to get into the North Atlantic Oscillation as we get more into this series. A couple of parts from now, you're going to get into a little bit more about the NAO phase. So by all means, keep an eye on the links there to the left that you see there on your YouTube screen there, and we'll be talking about the NAO phase as we get on into the rest of this series. In terms of precipitation, we also have roughly a 35 to 40% chance of below normal precipitation over that 3-month period. Now, again, that doesn't preclude snow events, but does make mixed precipitation and rainfall events more likely to be more prevalent. Now, certainly, again, you can have periods where, despite a warmer on average period, if it does occur, you can definitely get into a snowy couple of weeks of snowy pattern where you do have a couple of snow events that occur. So bear in mind that the frequency, the number, and the intensity of events can't be predicted on a seasonal scale. And that's really kind of the weakness of this outlook, is that it really can't be predicted on this scale. And therefore, what you're seeing there is kind of a reflection of and an expression of the El Nino Southern Oscillation. The snowfall totals depend largely on the NAO phase once again, and uh, uh, as we talked about, we are going to get into more about the teleconnections as we go into later portions of this series. In summary, odds are favoring a weak La Nina, transitioning over to a neutral ENSO state as we get into the latter portions of the winter, heading on into the spring of 2026. Uncertainty does remain high, so bear that in mind. Our climate predictions do have skill in predicting seasonal averages, but do not have the ability to capture how much rain or snow we'll actually get over the course of an entire winter. So this is going to be covered in what you see from day to day from us in terms of our routine forecasts, our social media posts, and our briefing packages that you're going to see across the entire winter season. And we will keep you updated with the latest information at all times. In terms of La Nina, it doesn't really have a way to provide us a strong signal with regards to warmer or cooler winter for us, especially in a weaker phase. And we'll talk about that as we go through the rest of this series as well. Rather, we look to variations in teleconnections, such as the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, Pacific North American, and the stratospheric warming events. All of these are important parts of the winter weather outlook and something that we'll be talking about as we get into more of this series. However, comparing the winter conditions over the previous years can be challenging. And the reason for that is every winter is going to kind of have its own flavor for what it's actually going to be providing. So really no real one winter is going to be the same as the other. So bear that in mind, that on average we could be warmer than average, but that doesn't preclude a couple of really cold events, really snowy events from occurring along the way. And lastly, climate patterns and teleconnections are a good way to get a handle on the subseasonal variations. Once again, in the weather pattern, we're going to go into that in more detail as we get through the remainder of this. So thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate your time, as always. For more information, check out the CPC webpage to get their official outlook. They'll be updating throughout the upcoming winter. Keep an eye also on their ENSO page. They'll be updating the latest ENSO statistics as well. And then finally, keep an eye on our climate page on our webpage at weather.gov/Wakefield for the latest information. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be getting into local climatology and teleconnections with the next portion of our series. Thanks so much.